Hi, I'm Dan. Welcome to a Horizon Awaits camper renovation video. I've done a couple of these videos in the past to show people the renovations I've done on the camper. I did a big one here when I put this table in. I removed the dinette and put this work table in. You can see that in our archive. And I also did a video step-by-step instructions how we put this bigger sink in. In this video, I'm going to show you the latest renovation I'm doing, which is to fix one of the major problems we have with the GeoPro 19FD, and that is the bathroom. We love our GeoPro 19FD, but the bathroom in here is pretty small. There's nothing you can do when you have a small camper, but it's a pretty small bathroom. The toilet here, when I sit down, I'm 6'2". When I sit down, it's a very tight situation, especially with the door closed. So, one of the issues we have is this sink. The sink's a good sized sink, but it's a bit too large for this small space. So, thanks to Amanda Vegso, I'm sorry if I did your name wrong, from the Camping with My 19FD GeoPro forum on Facebook. She showed me a great renovation where she put in a smaller sink. And so we're going to do the exact same thing in my GeoPro, and I'm going to show you step by step how I'm doing it. That'll give us another, she says, 6 inches of legroom. So that'll give you more room when you sit on the toilet, but also when we get out of the shower and you're trying to dry off, we've got this small space in here. 6 more inches of legroom will make a big difference. So this renovation, we're going to change the bathroom from this to this. So there's a small sink, so it gives us about a half a foot of extra room in the bathroom. So this mat we have in front of our tub used to have to run this way. Now it has room to do this way. When you get out of the shower, you should have a lot more room to dry off. That was a real problem in this camper. And of course, importantly, when you're 6'2" like me and you sit on the toilet, this would have to sit like this, as you saw in the previous video, or the previous section, before we had it removed. Now I can sit straight forward. There's a little less room on the sink, but we usually keep our toothbrushes and stuff in here, and then we'll put a couple things like soap on top of here. Then there's less room under the cupboard, but you know, there's a reasonable amount of storage. What my wife has done is put these rods across here, and a lot of the stuff she used to keep under the cupboard, she's going to keep on that shelf now with the rods to keep them on. We'll see how that works in the long run. One final thing is that I added a little cabinet under the sink so that you can store a few things under there, so that's not completely wasted space. It's very small, kind of like the bottom cabinet under the stove in the 19FD. You can put very little in there, you can put very little in here, but it's something. So the one thing I got to tell you when you put this in is that the instructions that come with this sink are pretty weak, so make sure you get that thing all set together and put together correctly if you're going to put this in before you start putting stuff inside the camper, because it's not well designed in the instructions how to put together, and if you don't do it just right, it'll leak a little bit. So I had to go through a few times and tighten things to leak. The other thing I was going to say is that the plumbing is a bit offset, and so what I did was I just got a flexible pipe, and so it runs at an angle, but that J-bend will still be fine. So that works. Okay, so if you want to see how I did this, well, I'll do the step-by-step instructions, taking the old sink out and then installing this new sink. So if you want to make this, you can. If not, thanks for watching. So the first thing I have to do is to disconnect the taps and disconnect the plumbing. So we need to turn off the water first. We should turn off the power too, because we're going to be collecting that. Make sure all the water is out of the lines before you do this. You probably just turn the tap on and turn the tap on in the tub so that all the water pressure will release. Then I have this handy dandy tap removing tool, which is I highly recommend whenever you're working on taps under the sink. It's very hard to get a wrench, a regular wrench under here. But if you put this thing on, it's very simple. I already loosened that one, but this is one that hasn't been loosened. And relatively simply loosen a fitting where it's very hard to get a normal wrench into. Not that expensive a tool, and if you have a lot of plumbing work or you do public work regularly, it's a very handy tool to have. So now the supply lines are out. I'm going to undo the mounting threads to take the tap off. Sometimes these are on pretty tight, but in this case they're fairly loose. Now if you can see this on this side, this is a an air gap hose for the black tank flush, so that you don't get backflow into the hose. So it doesn't actually connect anything. It connects to the black flush line and then to the outside air, and it just keeps it above the line of the entry point of the black flow. So this doesn't connect anything. They just put it here as a convenient mount point. So we're gonna have to install that somewhere under the sink also as a mount point. I'll take that off in a little bit. Now I'm going to disconnect the drain lines. You can see I put a bucket here because the trap will probably have water in it, unless it's been a long time your camper's been stored. As I said, the trap is probably full of water. So I get the trap out. As you can see, I disconnected the top underneath, so I can just take the top right out. So the next thing we're going to do is try to take the cabinet out. Now, as I said, this supply line is connected, not the supply line, but the air gap line is connected to the sink. But I think what I'll do is unscrew all the screws before I take that supply line out, so that way I can get it from back. As you can see, there's a number of screws in here, the standard square head screws that Forest River GeoPro uses to hold the sink in. So I'm going to just take out the square bolt and undo all of those. One cool thing is that the GeoPro Forest River ran the underlay, the vinyl, through the whole camper first before they put the fixtures in. So when we make this cabinet smaller, we'll still have flooring in front. It may have a couple screw holes, but at least we won't have to replace the whole flooring to get it to match. That's cool. You can just use a regular screwdriver to get these out, but they're pretty long and tight, so I just go ahead and use a cordless power drill. But obviously you could use just a regular screwdriver. Okay, once you've taken all the screws out, you need to run your razor knife all around the caulk that's holding well, it's basically caulking the thing in, but it also holds it in place. So you cut that off, that caulk, so we can pull the sink loose. In addition, I put the toilet paper hole roller on this, so I'm going to take that off too, so it's not in the way. Okay, now I've cut all the seals now, and I've got all the screws out, including the extra one I missed over here, and one right in the corner. Right in the corner here at the level of the other 3 screws across, but right inside the track there. So I missed those 2 screws, and I couldn't come out at first, but now I've got it loosened, so now we should be able to pull it out. So as I said, there's a air supply line, air gap line. There's also this power point up front, this outlet. So next step is we're going to take the outlet off by just removing the cover, and then there's 2 screws here that go off the back. And take that out. As I said, make sure your power is disconnected and your batteries, your inverter's not on, because this is a 120 volt, so it should be all right with just on battery as long as your inverter's off. And if you saw my video for converting the dinette to a computer table, you'll know I took the outlet there, and these outlets are cheap RV outlets, and they don't actually screw in. You don't have to undo those screws on each side all the way. You just release a bit, and 2 tabs fold in, and then you can pull it through the hole. So, and then we'll feed it back through the hole. Now we're going to have to disconnect the connections. They're wire wrapped on this cabinet, so I'm just going to cut the 2 wire wraps, and then the cable we'll just leave on the floor for now. Okay, what I end up doing is just disconnecting the 2 air gap lines. The connector at the top is like mounted on with a screw, and it was a real pain to get them off because one of them was cross-threaded and it was mounted right up against the support bracket, so you couldn't turn it, it would hit those notches. So it took a bit of work to get those off. Not very convenient working under there, but I did get them off. So the connector's still at the top, we'll take that off later. Another thing to note is when you take the supply lines off and then you let them sit, there'll be some water in them because of course they're vertical. So what I had to do was put the bucket on an angle, tip the hoses down there to get the water out, otherwise when I tipped it down they would all go over the floor. So make sure you drain those lines. Don't let it run all over the floor, you'll have a big mess. So everything's disconnected now. So I can go ahead and take the whole cabinet out and remove it from the trailer. That's what I'm going to do now. Okay, once the cabinet's out, that's what we're left with. There's some water on the floor, even though I try to be careful and drain the lines and dump them out into a bucket. Still, you get some drips, but you gotta expect that, but at least it's not a flood. So now we're gonna measure the new cabinet, see how high it goes, because we want to set it at the same level as the previous one. Hopefully we won't have to change the plumbing as much. This is the sink after I built it. It comes in a flat pack and you got to put it together. I'm not giving you instructions on doing that because if you ever put it together, any kind of IKEA furniture or anything, it's pretty straightforward. Just follow the directions. And then this top will go on once the sink's in place. So the next thing I've got to do is measure the height, because this is a wall mount. So I was going to use a box because the wall of the camper is not strong enough to support that. So I'm going to build a box underneath it out of 2x4s to hold it off the floor. So I need to measure how high that needs to be. So that's the next thing, and then I'll build that. To get the exact height that the sink needs to be, I'm going to hold the sink up here, and then my assistant and wife is going to go under the sink and right along on the back wall, at the bottom where the sink hits the wall, so I know exactly how high I need to build the support, rather than measuring it. Okay, I think that's right there. Got it right up against the cabinet? Okay, you need to remove all the caulk that was already there. Even if you're going to put a cabinet that's going to cover that area, because this cabinet, the width is a little wider, so you won't see that. Especially at the top, because the thing is, new silicone caulk generally doesn't adhere to old silicone caulk, so you need to be able to put it right on the wall. This is especially true on the shower surround. So what I did was I scraped off all the caulk along the edge, along the side here. It's very hard to get that caulk off without damaging the wall. So what I found is I use a razor blade, but don't use the sharp part of the razor. I actually use the back end of the razor, like the blunt side, to scrape it, as if it becomes a very thin piece of metal. So, you know, wear some gloves so you don't cut yourself, and then run that. But you can also use like a flat-bladed screwdriver or a chisel or something. But you want to get as much of that caulk off as you can, especially on the side of the tub and along the edge of the tub, because, well, here this is going to be exposed because the new sink won't be as deep, and then here you're going to be putting new caulk there, and I want to make sure it adheres, especially along here. So no big gap here where it hits the wall, so I left the caulk that was on the surround, but and then the top will be there. So that's the next thing I did. Now that I've got the sink out, I want to do something about these connection lines. These fortunately are PEX, but these standard connections they put on, I really don't like them. They seem to leak a lot. At least they're better because they're PEX rather than this kind of braided line that they're using for other the water lines in the camper. These ones almost always leak, and those can't be replaced easily with a shark bite because it's a weird diameter. So I have to use regular clamps and tighten them down really tight when I replace these. However, I'm not going to replace those because they're just for the black tank flush. Hopefully we'll check and see if they don't work, if they don't leak. But I want to check for all leaks before I put the cabinet in. So what I'm going to do is replace these endings with the shark bite connectors. These things are shark bites for PEX, so they're 1/2 inch PEX, and then the connector here is 3/8 inch. The top that comes with the sink has a 3/8 inch braided line with a connector that'll go onto that, a female connector that'll go onto that. And this also allows me to have a turn off in case I ever want to turn the water off and disconnect the sink for some reason. I don't have to worry about turn off the water and draining the water from the whole camper. Not really necessary, but I usually try to put some kind of shut off in if I'm replacing things. So to replace these, you need a pipe cutter. This is designed for PEX or CPVC. You want to get the line as straight as possible. So try to make this as completely level when you put it on. And we're just going to cut it right through. That looks pretty straight to me. There's a tool that SharkBite sells that you put that on there, and it'll, I think, chamfer the edge a bit and make sure it's level. Maybe even flare it, I don't know. But I've done this lots of times and not used that tool, so you probably should use that tool. I don't think it's expensive. It comes with a strip for all the different pipe sizes, and you just take your pipe size you need and run it across there, kind of like deburring a pipe if you're using copper. But I haven't had too many problems with this, so all I need to do is put this SharkBite on. So I'll take this decorative plate off, and then we put it on top with the liner inside. And I'm just going to put it down and push down so it goes all the way in. The other thing that tool does is it lets you know how far down you have to push it to go completely on. So that's on now, I think. And then I can put the decorative plate on so that it's covering the connection. This will set under the sink like this so I can connect the lines to it. For some reason the hot, I left this a straight up connection. I'll probably regret that. I'll have to move it up. I thought I was buying 2 right angle connections, but I got this one was a straight. So we'll see how that works. If it's the worst case scenario, I can take it back off by using the SharkBite tool to remove a SharkBite. That's the great thing about a SharkBite. So what I'm going to do now is I'll turn both the valves off, and I'm going to pressurize the system and see if there's any leaks anywhere, so I can fix them before I put the cabinet in. Okay, good news. They're not leaking. I've got the city water on, and I ran the pressure up and let out the lines, and there's no water coming out of my new SharkBite connectors. I also want to check the connection on the floor there, even though that was already there, not leaking. Now that I'm going to move them around to put the sink on, now I just want to make sure. I can't really trust those factory connections. They always seem to spring a leak eventually, so I just wanted to check that with water pressure in there before I put the sink in, because it's going to be obviously difficult to get back in with it. A lot of work, so I want to check it now. So looks like it's working, and we're ready to go ahead and get the platform for the sink built. Okay, so this is the box I made to go under the sink. The sink, as you know, is a wall mount sink, but the trailer wall won't support it, so I'm going to have to put a box underneath to support the weight of the sink. And this is what I did. I used 3/4 inch poplar boards. I cut one side the height I needed, so I measured in that line I put on the bottom of the trailer was 9 5/8 inch high off the floor. So I have a 1/2 inch board, poplar board on top to take the weight. So a 1/2 inch off of 9 5/8 is 9 1/8. So I made this board 9 1/8 tall. I did a second one on this side, 9 1/8 tall. And then I have approximately the depth of the cabinet, a little bit shorter because I want to put this door on front. And I took it into the camper, into the bathroom area, and measured the notch for the pipes on the toilet side and on the tub side, and I notched those both out with a jigsaw. Then I put the 1/2 inch boards to support across the top, 2 of them. One I had to strip down so it fit on top. And I left the gap. It's big enough for the pipe to go up. So the pipe that goes in the under the sink comes out that far, so that that way the pipes and all the plumbing lines can go up back here behind the sink, but the front is still supported. So I'll screw through the sink bottom into this support, and I put a little piece of the 1/2 inch on here on the top just to make it level. I didn't do it on this side because it should be supported and screwed in enough on this side, but that way this side is going to be exposed. I've sanded it down so it's kind of a flat surface. Then what I did is I put a 1/2 inch strip here, and then I decided that since I'm taking away some of the storage, I could have just put a piece of board on front and closed it off like the other one I saw was done. But every bit of storage is important in the camper. So I put this door on the front, and then when you open it, there'll be a bit of storage here where you can put some paper towels or something. I mean, toilet paper or something. Maybe there's toilet paper storage, maybe something else. I don't know what yet. But that'll give us the ability to store stuff under there, not waste the space. I put 2 cleats inside on the same surface area. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a piece of Luan, and I'll screw it into this cleats, and that way it'll keep anything I store in there from going up against the pipes and wiring. It'll be a kind of enclosed space. Not particularly large, but anyways, good enough to store some things in. So basically I just put a piano hinge on here. Had to trim down and chamfer the edges a bit so that they wouldn't hit when you open it. But then I just put a latch on the top here and a handle, and that gives me a little bit of storage under the sink. It's a little lower than the sink base is, so that it doesn't hit when it opens, but it'll be reachable under the sink. The sink sticks out on this side a little bit and sticks out this edge a little bit so that the top will be covered. But what's going to happen now is my wife's going to paint this white. She decides she wants to have it white. And when that's finished, I'll put it in, screw it in place against the wall, and then I'll put the Luan panel in the back, and then I can start putting the sink on top. Okay, so the pipes are going to go straight up behind the sink. I'll show you how to do that later. But right now I'm going to slide this new box in, support in. Slide this new support in. As you can see, it goes all the way against the wall. The pipe's right now putting pressure up against it, so it's not supporting them. It's not standing up perfectly, but you can see right here it'll fit in. And the door will open like that, and I can still access under there the storage area. So we'll put the sink on top of this, and it should bring up to the right height. What I plan on doing is cutting a notch in the bottom of the sink for this pipe to go through, and also notches for all the supply lines to go through. The electrical wiring should go up the same notch as the sink, because the pipe doesn't go all the way to the wall. That way I don't have to cut the pipe to get the sink on, and I can just slide it into place. Once that's in, I'll screw the bottom of the sink into this baseboard, and of course I also have to put this backing into the wall. Okay, you see the exposed areas of the cabinet are painted now, and I cut this piece of Luan to make a backer. So once I install the cabinet, I'll put a cleat at the back to screw it into the wall, and on this side it'll be screwed into the tub surround, and then this Luan will go in there and make a backing for the cabinet. We didn't paint the inside of the cabinet. She might do that later, but right now just leaving it as wood. So now I guess I'm ready to go ahead and take it to the camper and screw the cabinet in. Okay, I put the cabinet in here, and I pre-drilled some holes to put the screws that holding the previous cabinet in. I put 2 in the base here into the floor, 1 in the side into the tub surround, and 1 in the back to hold it against the wall. I think that should be enough support for the cabinet. Of course, the actual cabinet itself will also be screwed in. So I'm going to just put those screws in now. Okay, I put all the screws in. It's pretty sturdy now, and they're pretty tight. One little unforeseen circumstance is that the door, when it comes down, hits this access panel. It's all right because you can still reach in there. It just stops it from falling all the way to the floor. Not a big issue. I'm going to put the backer in, the Luan backer panel into the back of it. Okay, the screws are in now, so the storage area is completed. As you can see, the storage area is very small. I kind of wonder if it was even worth the effort, but it's done now. Maybe if you're doing this, you have to think about whether or not you really want to do the work to do the storage area. Just put a panel on the front. Alright, I've put the cabinet on top of the shelf. Now I need to cut the notches to be able to push the cabinet back against the wall around the pipes. So I'm going to start with the waste pipe. I'm going to mark where the pipe is when I have the cabinet pushed all the way against the wall. So I need to cut a mark there, and then I'll measure how far in it needs to be. Okay, as I'm holding the cabinet in against the wall, I see that the pipe goes out 2.5 inches. So I needed to make a channel with a semicircle top that goes out at least 2.5 inches. So I'll mark that and then we'll cut it. Okay, I've marked it with a pen, the 2.5 inches and the width we measured. And I'm going to take my jigsaw and cut that shape out. Okay, so I put it in with the notch, cut it out, and it seems to fit pretty well. I won't be able to find it if it works if it's deep enough until I push it all the way back, but I can't do that until I cut the notches for the hoses here, because right now they're hitting the hoses to go back. So I'm going to mark space for the hoses, a little rectangle for all the hoses to go through, and then I will cut that notch out, and then we should be able to push the sink backs all the way to the wall. Okay, I've cut the notches out for both the pipes, the supply lines and the pipes. One thing is this cabinet is MDF, which is kind of a press board type of thing, and it's got this plastic coating to keep it waterproof. But since I've cut into it, the MDF is exposed, which means if you spilt some water on the bottom of this cabinet, which, you know, liquid of any type, it's going to leak back there, and it'll be very hard to clean it up. And if it seeps into that MDF, the whole thing will start swelling. So what I've decided to do is I've taken some Flex Seal and just coated all the exposed MDF that I cut out. I'm going to let that dry, and then just in case any liquids spill in there, it shouldn't swell up the MDF. So it's a tip that I think you should probably do on your cabinet if you do it too. Okay, so now that I've got the pipe holes cut and Flex Sealed, put the shelf in, the cabinet in for fit. You can see that all the pipes fit. The cabinet goes up against the wall pretty good and sits on the shelf pretty good. So it's going to be screwed to the wall through these two holes right here. These are the screws that it comes with. These are some heavy duty screws. They're designed for actually holding the cabinet up on the wall as the only means of support. A bit too big for the camper. But these are the screws that held the previous cabinet on, and they seem to work pretty good. So we're going to use those. The screws that came with it come with a little cap to go over the screws. We'll see if we can reuse them for these screws. Now, observant watchers will say, there's one thing you haven't thought of yet for your cabinet, and that is the electrical outlet. Where is the electrical outlet going to go? Well, as you can see, the wires run in behind the pipe, the main stack pipe. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the electrical box on the outside here. So what I've done is created a template. And I'm going to put that template on here. And I know I've cut it the right size because I already test fitted the electrical box into it, and it hooks in there fine. So all I have to do is mark this template. All I have to do is mark this template on the cabinet, mark it with a marker, and then cut it out. And that's where the electrical cord will be on the outside of the cabinet. So that's the next thing I've got to do is mark and cut that. Okay, I've taped the template to the side of the cabinet, the side opposite the tub. And now I'm going to take this thin marker and just mark the outline of the template, and then I'll take it off and use a jigsaw to cut the space out. Okay, I've screwed the cabinet in. A couple tips if you're doing this project. When you drill into or cut this MDF, this cabinet, it's a black MDF powder goes everywhere. So you're going to have to vacuum up and wipe up regularly. It's really a mess. Secondly, the back wall here has got some extra aluminum support to hold the cabinet in. So you're not going to be able to just hand screw these screws into the wall. You're going to have to drill a hole first that's slightly smaller than the screw, and then tighten down the screws into the metal, into the aluminum to hold it in place. And don't over tighten it, because all you're going to do is bend the aluminum. So just tighten it up to the nice and snug and then stop. So here's the electrical outlet that's in place. I think it's in a decent location. The sink should stick over a little bit, but you should be able to plug in anyways. The supply lines are here. I'm going to have to connect to them. And the air gap is going to be mounted somewhere on this wall here. I'll have to see how far up we have to do that, for the sink might be in the way. I'll have to figure that out once I put the sink top in, but that'll be the air gap for the black tank flush. Will try to fit under here somewhere, but as you can see, the 4 hoses, supply hoses, fit up through the notch I put there, and then the electrical wire and the drain pipe through that notch. And I ran the electrical wire over and I just kind of coiled it up because it's got more wire than you need, but that's good, and pushed it up against the wall here. And so that's pretty good. I'm just ready to put the top on now. Okay, the cabinet's all in, and as you can see, I lowered the connections on the pipe here when I put the sink on top. The supply lines to the faucet are pretty long, and I don't want to have them bundled up underneath the sink. I want to be accessible, so I just cut and removed and moved the shark bites. The nice thing about shark bites is they're easy to take off and put back on. As far as the air gap for the black water tank flush, I managed to put it here. I screwed the connector in to the base of the support for the connector to the base of the cabinet back wall, and this chest in it fits under the sink there with a little bit of gap, so that's where those lines are. So I put the sink tucked together and put it on, and we can connect the plumbing up. Okay, that's the sink. It's together. The instructions, and supply lines are here. I'm going to connect the supply lines up, and then we got to just do the drain pipe. Of course, that's easier said than done. That plain pipe might be a little bit complicated to put in, but for the most part, that part of the sink is in. Okay, I've connected the supply lines for the faucet to the actual supply lines. Turns the valves on. Checking for any leaks. I don't see any. Looks good. I'm running the faucet, the sink over the tub, because of course the drain lines are on right now. Don't let water go everywhere, so that way it'll fall into the tub. And open the valve. And now you just turn the faucet on and make sure everything's working. Looks like it is, so we're good to go. Okay, that's the under plumbing done. I had to cut this pipe that comes out of the stack to be shorter, so it goes further in, because obviously this cabinet's smaller. I had to cut the metal pipe that comes with it shorter, because it was going all the way down to here. That comes with the sink trap, so that it would fit in there. You could just use a plastic one. These are just standard, but I used the metal that came with it. And then, because these don't line up correctly, I went ahead and got a flexible tailpipe connector and hooked it on there. That way it shifts it over a little bit, so that it's lined up better. And then that's it. So the sink's basically in. Now what I got to do is I'm going to caulk the underside of this sink top to hold the sink on, because that's all they really give you to hold the sink on is caulk. That's usually what we do in residential construction anyways. The sink top is held on by caulk and gravity. Of course, in the trailer, when you're driving down the road, there's a lot more vibration, but I think the caulk will hold anyways. And of course, I'll caulk all around the sink like it was originally, around the tub surround, go on the seam of the tub and down to the floor, and then I think we'll be done. So I can turn on the water now. It's heading down the drain without any leaks. You can see I ran the electrical cable up to the top and down the pipes so that it's not in the way of the cabinet. The cabinet doesn't give you a whole lot of room, but you know, the more I can keep at the back of the cabinet, the more space we'll have. So that's the step-by-step instructions. The sink's in now. As you saw at the beginning of this video. We haven't taken it on a camping trip yet, but I'm pretty happy with it and so far, and so we'll see how it is when we're camping. Thanks for watching, and like and subscribe to this video to see the other videos I'm putting out on renovating the campers.